Hello everyone, hopefully I've got the entirety of this in frame. It looks like I have on my little camera sort of viewfinder, but I won't be able to tell properly until I've edited the video. So anyway, I wanted to do a video on the L1A1 SLR, but more importantly the FN FAL or FAL in general. Now, it's probably my favourite rifle in history. Sadly, because I'm not in America, I haven't had the chance to shoot one. This is a deactivated one, I'll say right at the beginning, before people start saying you're going to shoot somebody waving it around like this. Can't shoot anyone, it's an inert rifle. But I wanted to talk about the history of the rifle and why it was so important in sort of weapons design, you know, in history, and what makes it such a good rifle for what it does, because there's quite a lot of people who say bad things about this rifle, not really understanding, I don't think, why it was built the way it was built and sort of what it was intended to do. So basically, you've just come out of World War II, and FN, Fabrique Nationale in Belgium, is trying to design a rifle, and they didn't originally intend it to be in this calibre. This was designed from, I think it was a lower calibre, something like 6mm something or other, and basically what happened was America was introducing the 7.62 NATO round, and FN were requested to make a rifle that fit it. So they had another rifle that was being designed, and they just refit it to fit this round, some small modifications to the rifle, and this is what you ended up with, the FN FAL, or FAL, and it was a really good design. And it became so popular it was known as the right arm of the free world, and it was adopted by somewhere between 70 to 90 countries. Some of these countries purchased production licenses for it so they could build it themselves. Other countries just built other manufactured versions of it. Other countries also produced it illegally without a license, but it was used in, by a huge amount of countries, up to 90 I've seen on some estimates. And this was everywhere from lots of European countries, lots of South American countries, and lots of African countries. Obviously, this is really the competitor to the Kalashnikov. If the Kalashnikov was the gun of communism, this was it was called the right arm of the free world. Everywhere, funnily enough, except America adopted it. America went for a rifle called the M14. The FAL competed against it in a lot of weapons competitions, but the M14 was deemed to be better, and it's considered to be quite suspect now whether the M14 was actually the better rifle, or it was simply sort of lobbying that got the M14 in. Unfortunately, the M14 didn't last in service for all that long in America, because there was troubles with it in Vietnam, and America wanted to change to the 5.56 cartridge at this point, when everybody else was using 7.62 NATO. Now, what makes the FAL such a good rifle is that the 7.62 NATO cartridge is basically the best of the bolt-action rifle type power cartridges. It wasn't actually in any of the bolt-action rifles because it's more modern than them, but if you think of something like 303 British or the 7.62 Russian round 54, the 7.62 by 54mm, it's roughly equal in power to those. I don't know if it was quite as powerful as the Mauser cartridge the Germans used, which I think was 7.92, something like that, or the American 30 caliber I think was a bit more powerful. But in general, it's got the power of a rifle that can shoot out to about a mile. But the advantage to this compared to a bolt-action rifle is, if you imagine, if this was a bolt-action rifle, you'd have to be doing that every shot, and you normally didn't have magazine-fed bolt-action rifles. You'd have to pull the top back, insert a clip, push the rounds in or thumb the rounds in individually, close it, and then you normally had about 5 rounds. The Enfield that this replaced in the British Army held 10 rounds, but I have had people comment saying you couldn't reliably fit 10 rounds in the Enfield all the time because the springs in the mag weren't very good. But I don't have experience with shooting it, so I can't verify if that's true or not. But obviously what made the FAL so good in comparison is you have here your mag release. You can just pop the mag straight out and a new mag in. When I get the lip right, there we go. 20 rounds in that magazine, and then you can switch it straight out in a few seconds if you're trying to do it with a new mag. And obviously that gives you a massive firepower advantage to somebody who's having to shoot 5 rounds manually bolting, and then put it in, put more rounds in. I've heard some people complain that this is called an assault rifle, and it's not an assault rifle. The term we use for them is battle rifle, and I know some people don't like that term either, but it was called an assault rifle because in the day, I think the FAL stands for, it's something like Fusil Automatique Léger. I don't speak French, that's probably completely wrong, but from my understanding it stands for lightweight assault rifle. And a lot of people will be saying, this isn't a lightweight assault rifle, it's massive. That's because you're comparing it to what we consider today to be an assault rifle. something like the M16, the M4, that's more of a carbine, the SA-80, L85 series of rifles, things like that, the French FAMAS. This was considered an assault rifle back in the day because it was a lot lighter than automatic sort of handheld weapons of the time. If you think back to World War II, the Americans had the Browning automatic rifle, the Bar, and that was a lot heavier than this is. And if you think the Bren gun that Britain had is a light machine gun sort of support weapon, again, much heavier than this. This is sort of a stopgap. It's considered to be an assault rifle of the day because there was nothing quite like it. The German Sturmgewehr would have been similar in weight to this. I don't know exact weight of the Sturmgewehr offhand, but it would have been very similar to this. The barrel would have been a bit shorter, but overall there wouldn't be much difference in it. So there's nothing wrong with calling it assault rifle, because at the time this rifle was made, this was an assault rifle. Like I said, it's not too heavy. The guts are not in this one for the most part because it's deactivated, but even if you added another kilo on, it's quite manageable, especially if you're carrying it around with a sling. Compared to some bolt action rifles, the ergonomics are very good on this rifle. So again, what made this so good, in my opinion, this is one of the really neat features on the rifle. You have a gas selector at the front, and what this does is this affects the cycling. So you can put it down from 0, and it either goes up to 0 to 11 is the numbers on it. And basically what it does is this affects how much gas goes backwards to cycle the action of the rifle. Now unfortunately I can't show you the action in here, as I said, because it's deactivated. That's where the action would have been all in there. But basically what happens on this is you have the gas selector. When set to 0, as far as I'm aware, it doesn't send any gas back. When set to 11, it will give you a really good kicking where it sends loads of gas back. So what you'd do is you'd edit it for the climate and condition of the rifle. So I think about 2 or 3 was what it was normally kept on in perfect conditions. And then if you're in a dusty, humid area or something, you'd put that higher, so you'd feel more recoil. You'd have a marginal loss of velocity on the actual bullet coming out of the rifle, but it would feed properly, and the action would keep cycling. On most rifles that are considered to be reliable, like the Kalashnikovs, you have a set, quite high sort of gas feedback coming back from the front of the rifle, but on the FAL it was adjustable, so you could fix it like that. Now, this was in service for a very long time with a lot of countries. It was in service with Britain until the 80s when the SA-80 project replaced it. And in most other countries in Europe, apart from America when they changed from the M14 to the M16 in the sort of early 60s, this was in service, or variants of this were in service in lots of countries, you know, well until the 80s, 90s. Some countries still haven't replaced it, or they use it in limited roles because it's a very, very good rifle. One of the things it's not good at is urban combat. Basically, as you can see, it's a very long rifle. It'd be very hard to navigate around corners. The other issue is of course, with the powerful cartridge in there, it's going to keep going through walls. And you can't shoot to wound with this. I know shooting to wound isn't an actual proper practice, because bullets, of course, are always lethal. It's just sometimes you could shoot somebody somewhere and, you know, if they were medically treated, it wouldn't kill them. However, this is a powerful cartridge. So if there's been incidents, obviously, where this has been used, I think on a shoot to wound basis, and that's caused controversy, where obviously the person's not wounded, they're dead because of how powerful it is. But like I said, this is a proper cartridge. It's not, you know, a scaled down rifle round. This is a full size, comparable to a bolt action rifle round this thing fires. It's an interesting thing what happened with Germany of this rifle. In Germany, they weren't allowed to produce it because of World War II, and FN didn't trust the Germans. So the FAL in Germany was called the G1, and they had a machine gun variant called the G2, which I think was a slightly longer barrel with a bipod, an automatic fire, a bit like the RPK. One thing to note is that the British versions were semi-automatic only, but most variants of the FAL had a fully automatic function. But it's quite uncontrollable, a big round like this, kicking around like that when you're shooting it. That's why some places limited it to semi-auto only, because you're only really going to be accurate with these in semi-automatic mode. So what happened with Germany is they had the G1, but they couldn't produce their own license for it, and they didn't have enough FALs, so they wanted to get more. So what they did was, there was a company in Spain called SETME that made what's now known as the G3. It was called the SETME rifle with them. And then Germany basically bought the rights, Heckler & Koch, to make a rifle called the G3 out of the SETME rifle. And then the G3, which is also another very good battle rifle. Sadly, I don't have one in my collection, but if I see one cheap on the Activated Gun site, I'll certainly get one. The G3 basically went into service with Germany and a few other countries. The Setme rifle was used by Spain and probably a few other countries as well. And like with the M14 in America, you had a lot of 7.62, what were now called battle rifles, which are these full power sort of bolt action type rifles, but they're semi-automatic, fed by a magazine. So you had all those, and then really this was only replaced in most countries due to the weight of the bullets and the weight and length. Once you, as you see now, I've just hit something with it. Once you had much shorter assault rifles where the barrel would only really come to here. They modernised for smaller cartridges, so soldiers could carry more cartridges on them, rather than just a few sort of mags of these. But the rifles were a lot less powerful. So you had less range, and although they were better on automatic function, there's a lot of argument whether these rifles should be brought back simply because they offer, you know, much longer range and power. Now, what's happened in a lot of countries is they've added these back in as marksman rifles, designated marksman rifles, but it's not normally the FAL. What FN have done now is they brought a rifle in called the Scar H, which is a much more accurate rifle, and I've heard a lot of people complaining about FALs and other battle rifles saying they're not that accurate. On paper they're not that accurate because they weren't designed for shooting targets on a range at sort of 1,000 metres or whatever with pinpoint accuracy. Something like an M16 is a lot more accurate when shooting paper targets. This is designed to hit man-sized silhouettes at long ranges and knock them down flat. This carries a lot more energy, so even if it's not pinpoint accurate, if you hit somebody centre mass of them with this, it will kill them. That's what it's designed to do. It's a powerful rifle. So you don't need that much smaller amount of accuracy that you would with an assault rifle in 5.56 or 5.45. So these are sort of making a comeback, not this particular rifle, but the caliber with designated marksman rifles. And when people complain about the accuracy, that's another sort of problem. These are meant to be cheap to produce rifles you could issue to every soldier, you know, in the Cold War against the Russian hordes. So you needed a rifle that was cheap and reliable, not something that was incredibly accurate. Of course, the more accurate you start making a rifle, the less reliable it comes and the cost goes up to build it. So that's why you lost, you know, that's why these were built to be sort of sturdy, good all-round rifles, not incredibly accurate precision rifles, because in a massive war you win on logistics, being able to outproduce your enemy and outfield them, not by having a rifle that's slightly more accurate. If you look into a war and see when a side that has maybe better tactics and better equipment will lose, look at Germany in World War II. The super heavy German tanks like the Tiger and King Tiger aren't a match for mass-produced Russian T-34s or American Sherman tanks, just because if you can mass produce to such a degree that the enemy can't keep up, you know, they won't ever win. So that's why a rifle like this and a G3 were designed to be cheap and cheerful, do the job they were designed to do, but they're not super accurate rifles where a lot of people complain. Another complaint about that seems to come from people buying them, say in America, and then saying, oh, it's not very accurate. Part of the problem there is you could be getting any sort of FAL when you're obviously getting them. Some built from parts kits that don't quite fit together. The British FALs are imperial FALs. Many of the other countries had metric FALs. They're not quite the same in terms of measurements with all the bits. So you probably could cannibalise parts to get them working from part kits, but that doesn't mean they'll fit together very well and be incredibly accurate. Another thing to mention about that is because this rifle was used by so many countries and there was lots of unofficial licensed ones built, what that meant is that obviously certain countries will produce these in crap quality. So what would have happened is, if you've managed to get, maybe, I think the Indian ones aren't known to be very reliable. I think they might be called Inchipores, I'm not sure. But the quality on them can vary a lot. Probably the same with some of the illegally produced South American ones. So what happens is, if you've bought one of those and got that in America and you're shooting it, yes, it's going to not be as good as the people saying this is a brilliant rifle with some of the really nice ones like the British built ones. It's just not the same. That's not to be having a go at those countries, it's just sort of the reality of the fact that if you've got one FAL that's been built sort of somewhere like Enfield and you've got another one that's been built, you know, sort of in a mass-produced factory somewhere else, with not an official license, where you sort of backwards engineered the rifle to do it, it's not going to be the same quality. As for sights on this thing, you've got a rear sort of peep sight, ghost ring, and you've got your front 3-post sight there. That's perfectly acceptable. As I said, it's not precision rifle. You hit a man-sized target at quite long range and it will knock them down. You can't adjust the windage on this without an armourer's tool. You can only adjust the elevation. And I think that was basically, they'd get the rifle right for you, don't mess about with it. So you can adjust the elevation up here. It's quite stiff, but this is a well-built rifle. Not much is going to fall apart. The carry handle's here, and as you can see from the carry handle, the weight of the rifle is fairly well balanced. If I hold it there, yeah, it's not front heavy, it's not rear heavy, it's pretty well balanced. With the internals in, that might affect that a bit more, I'm not sure. Another interesting thing is, although the extraction port for the bullet casings is on the right side of the rifle, on the left side of the rifle is the actual sort of charging handle. So what that's designed is so you can hold it in your right hand shouldered like that, pull that back to, once you've put a new mag in, get the rounds in the chamber. So that's that. If anybody who's used one knows, can you please tell me what this thing does here? There's a little button that goes down here on the bottom, and I'm not sure what it is because I've never found a manual that's explained it. I don't know if it's some sort of forward assist or feeding thing, but obviously I know the mag release is next to it. But there we go. This is the right arm of the free world. Probably one of the most important rifles ever built in terms of weapon design. It's still around today, kicking about in lots of countries and civil wars, although it's not really an official armament weapon anymore. But there you go. This was the West's answer to the Kalashnikov. It's a very reliable rifle, and it did the job it was meant to do. And now, of course, in the future, when it's not around anymore, people should talk about it. So there we go. This is the FN FAL, or FAL, and this one particular version is an L1A1 SLR, as used by the British Army.